SOC services should MSSPs build, partner, or buy? And emergency patching, managing your clients' zero-day fixes. That and the latest news and trends in the managed security space coming right up on Cyber for Hire.
Building bridges between managed security providers and their clients, it's the podcast where MSPs, vCISOs, and end users take a united stand against cybercrime. This is Cyber for Hire.
You know what's frustrating about managing security as an MSP? It's knowing that even after you've reviewed a system, firewall, or endpoint to make sure it's secure, it can still change the next day and you might never find out. Let me tell you, that sucks. That's why I want to tell you about LionGuard. See, some vendors talk about being a single pane of glass, but LionGuard actually delivers. They pull data from over 70 systems, use automation to detect changes, and alert you about the things that matter via a ticket in your PSA. If you truly want to secure your customers, visit MSSPalert.com/LionGuard to check it out for yourself or sign up for a demo today. All right, welcome to episode number 9 of Cyber for Hire. How's everybody doing today? I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media in New York, and joining me today on the other side of the continental divide is my co-host and partner in cybercrime, Ryan Morris, principal consultant with Morris Management Partners. Welcome, Ryan. Ryan, I can barely keep up. First, it was Greece, then Thailand. I'm not even going to ask if Thailand was amazing. I'm sure it was. Instead, I'm just going to ask, how bad is the jet lag?
You know, the jet lag is worse than ever. Literally, I think it's a question of we took a couple of years off of the road and not going to all these places to do these things. And so that muscle needs to be redeveloped. What I will say is I am down for redeveloping that muscle. Let's do that. Let's get back on planes. Let's fly around the world. Let's get good at jet lag again. And anybody who wants to come along, seeing the other side of the world is awesome.
I imagine. Well, don't be too jealous. I did a little traveling myself over Super Bowl weekend. I went to the Pez factory in Orange, Connecticut. So, take that.
Excellent.
That's just as good as Thailand. We'll swap notes later on that. But in the meantime, plenty to cover today, as always. Some news is just so important it can't wait, which is why we want to share with everyone what's top of mind today. So our front and center headline is the ransomware attack on VMware hypervisors. The culprit was a malware that exploited a 2-year-old remote control execution, a remote code execution flaw in the product. The malware from unknown actors, it threatens exfiltration of sensitive information. Not clear if it really does do that, but it also encrypts files and tries to actually shut down the virtual machines. Fortunately, CISA has made available a tool that allows companies to reconstruct affected virtual machine metadata. Still, why should virtual machine attack incidents like this be top of mind for MSSPs, Ryan?
So I will say there are 3 things, and I do think this is very urgent. Number one, this is not new. This is literally, you mentioned it, 2 years old. The fix for this, the patch and the remediation for this was published in February of 2021, and yet it's still being used. So I think as an MSSP, we need to go back and say it's not enough to just focus on the new things and the way that we are dealing with real-time exploits. We need to make sure we can go back and verify that we have successfully remediated any of the library of past exploits. I think that's standard practice that we need to do. Number 2 in this, I'm looking at it from a customer onboarding perspective. In the last 2 years, my guess is you as an MSSP have added more than one new customer to your environment. Did your engagement, assessment, onboarding process go back and validate that this was a solved problem in your customer's environment? I think for every new customer we add to our business, that's great. It's exciting to add new customers, but that leads us to say we cannot assume that they have safely addressed all of the past exploits that they've been exposed to. So let's make sure we're going back and doing that. And number 3, I just want to put a nod to the idea of the simplicity of the virtual machine environment, right? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you said virtual machine. Everybody went, oh, that was very sophisticated and advanced. And only certified professionals were doing that. Now there is a proliferation of virtual machine environments because they have become much easier to configure and deploy. There are tools out there that will allow me, a non-technical engineer, to deploy a virtual machine in literally less than 3 minutes, point and click, and I can spin something up. As a result, we're starting to see a lot of VM deployments that are happening in a shadow IT type of approach where non-IT departments are spinning up their own virtual environments, especially when we multiply that by a cloud deployment in the customer world. Let's just remember, just because all of your virtual machines that you know about are very well vetted, very well patched, and they are up to date on all the latest capabilities, that doesn't mean that those are the only virtual machines that are running in your environment. So we need to have a discovery process that gets reinserted as a part of our operating process with our customers to identify when, not if, your customers outside of the IT department are spinning up some rogue VM environments, and those things are not necessarily carefully patched by a cybersecurity professional. So real-time environment, don't just pay attention to the new stuff. Let's go back and pay attention to yesterday. And remember, all of this is going to be happening in quantity as we get more into just put a credit card down and you too can spin up a cloud environment with a virtual machine, even if you're not an IT professional.
Now, all great points, Ryan. And for those interested in digging a little bit deeper into the story, you can always go to our show notes page and check out the links to the related news articles on that. Anyway, that's our top of mind hot take for the day. We want to hear from you on this and other subject matter that we present to you on our show. So please write to us at cyberforhire@cyberriskalliance.com. We might share your opinion or thoughts in a future episode. More news later in the show, but first it's time for our featured MSP industry news topic, presenting our big idea in business. SOC services should MSSPs build, partner, or buy? Security Operations Center services are in demand as many organizations are unable to stand up their own full-fledged SOC. For MSSPs looking to add, grow, or mature their own outsourced SOC services offering, a key early question is, do we build from scratch, partner with third parties, or buy these capabilities through a merger or acquisition? This session, which is sponsored by Netshurian, will look at the various pros and cons of each approach. So we have a great guest for you today. He is Ananth, Chief Strategy Officer at Netshurian and co-creator of Netshurian's Open XDR platform. With an extensive background in product development and cybersecurity operations, Ananth has consulted for many companies on their security and compliance strategies, audit policies, and automated reporting processes. He's a leading expert in IT security and compliance with over 25 years of experience in IT control and operations, and speaks frequently on cybersecurity topics of all kinds. And so, Ananth, we're really glad that you could be here today. Welcome. And I think a great place to start, honestly, before we go into all three approaches and examine the pros and cons of each of those approaches, let's just start with the why. And in this case, why is this such a key foundational decision for any MSSP looking to set up or expand their SOC operations, which of these three approaches they want to take?
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity. Security, of course, has become the thing. It used to be that MSPs could gain profit and customers simply by having IT skills, but those have become commodity items. And for many reasons, customers are really asking not just, am I up, but am I safe, am I secure? Because the consequences of not being safe, not being secure have really become devastating, from ransomware to compliance fines to name and shame attempts. Not being secure, especially in this digital age, is pretty much the same as being out of business. So then what's an MSP, or even perhaps one that has transitioned from MSP to MSSP, to do? That's the question that this topic really addresses.
So, Ananth, I really am looking forward to your kind of in the trenches experience as you have been dealing with this. One of the questions that we often hear from the world of the MSSP, we understand operations and we understand real-time response, right? Those things that are, in the flow of everyday activity versus the emergency situations. When we look at that from an IT operations point of view and a security emergency response point of view, in your experience, do you think that the one team of professionals can or should be doing both of those things? Or do you think that we need to literally physically separate the human groups that are dealing with that? Can the group that's keeping the systems online also be the group that's dealing with real-time security alert and response?
Typically, the answer is no, mostly because the skill sets that are necessary are quite different. It's sort of like having the surgeon and an anesthesiologist on hand. You need them both, otherwise, you really cannot perform a successful operation, and they each have a very specific role to play.
Okay, I love that response, and it leads to a challenge, obviously, right? That means more humans. That means more tools and capabilities. So, to Bradley's point here at the beginning, in your experience, is this something that, if I'm the typical MSP out here in the world, we all recognize real-time response as an urgent requirement in the customer environment? Is that something that I should be taking on myself, or what's your experience in that world?
So at the end of the day, the response, if you like, is in IT terms. Quarantine a machine, eject a USB, send the user to Siberia for retraining because they didn't follow the rules. And so at some point, these things are IT actions. The challenge, of course, is that you have a completely alien world of security that speaks in language like MITRE and lateral movement and ransomware and so on. And someone has to bridge that gap. But at the end of the day, you're taking IT actions. You're changing a firewall rule. You are ejecting a particular process from the system. You are quarantining and cleaning up an infected machine. So the two must somehow find a way to talk to each other, bridging from one side to the other side. So getting what we call actionable intelligence, right, answering the 5 Ws, is the key on the security side. Please tell me who, what, where, when, and what specifically you want me to do about this in IT terms. Tapping me on the shoulder and saying bad things are going on, or giving me mumbo jumbo like, a MITRE technique T1048 is occurring, means what again?
Right. I hear you on that, Ananth. And so now what I would be curious to do is, as we kind of set up in the little intro that I read, we want to talk a little bit about the 3 approaches and look over the pros and cons of each. So let's start with build. And I would have to imagine with the build approach, right, the con, or big one, is going to be prohibitive expense. You're taking it all on yourself. That could be a little bit of a daunting challenge. Maybe the biggest pro might be something like you enact exactly the vision and build it exactly the way you want because you're fully in control of it. That's just my guess. What would be your take on the pros and cons of build?
So it's sort of like buying a car. You have to have a big budget in order to buy the vehicle, and then you're responsible for its upkeep, maintenance of the platform, as well as operating it all day long. The good news is you're in full control. You can decide when you're going to change oil, how far you're going to go, where you're going to rotate tires. So full control is a very positive thing, outcome of building. Some other problems aside of the upfront cost is the time to value. It takes a long time to actually, just buy stuff, but mature processes, grow people, hire them, and so on. Another negative thing is the skill shortage. Globally, you cannot find security talent. So if you're going to build your own SOC and then operate it, you're going to find those folks. You're going to, better yet, keep them because, they're highly poachable fellies. And so that's a meaningful problem on the con side of things.
See, I love your focus on the human side there, Ananth. That's definitely one of the challenges that we've been noting in our work on this program. There's not enough of us. There's not enough people who we can hire. So that leads us to, if you're saying there are some challenges on the build side, I think that time to value question. If I'm a customer and you say to me, hey, this week I just spun up my new SOC, and you will be our very first customer. That's not who I'm trusting with my mission critical capabilities, right? That's not who I will deploy into my business environment, which leads me to that idea of the partnering strategy as a second criteria. I love the way Bradley set it up with the pros and cons on build, because there are some environments where that will be the right way to go. Not always. What are the pros and cons that you see from a partnering point of view? And if I'm an MSP and that's my strategy, what do I need to be actually looking for in a partner?
What you should be looking for is alignment with the kinds of technologies that you and your customers typically have, number one. Number two, on the business side, are the terms and conditions. Typically, MSPs are pay-go, meaning that you go for a month and you'd like to get billing. Very often, these are annual contracts paid upfront, and that might not work for an MSP. So there are some business considerations. And then, of course, what kind of coverage do they have? See, God is always in the detail. And so if you simply look at the marketing fluff, they will be all things to all people at nearly zero cost. But we know that's never really true. So you want to take that out for a spin. You want to see if the processes align, if they will fit like a glove to your hand, or they're going to come in heavy handed and say, well, that's not the way you do ticketing, and that's not the way you do RMM, and that's not the way you do this process, and that's not the people you should have, and start to dictate to you. They got to meet you where you live. Your current investments, your current people, your current team, your current style of working, your current way of billing. All of these things need to fit. If they do, then yeah, this can really be a multiplier. If you thought that build was tantamount to buying a car, why then partner is tantamount to a ride share, something like a Lyft or an Uber. Are they going to meet you where you want with the kind of vehicle that you want to the place that you want to go in the time that you want to go? If all of those are true and the price appears to be reasonable, why then this might be a good thing to do. But it's not always obvious what it is. It depends upon the use case, depends upon your situation, and depends upon how well the fit is.
That makes sense, Ananth. And so the third leg of this triad of possibilities is then the buying, and that involves potentially a merger or acquisition. And there's obviously a lot that goes into that, because anytime you have some kind of M&A activity, whatever the asset is that you're looking to bring into your organization and integrate, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there in terms of just assessing everything, its strengths, its weaknesses, your ability to try to make that kind of a seamless integration with the rest of your organization. So again, what are some of the advantages of this approach? What are some of the disadvantages or challenges associated with this approach?
So then the buy is sort of like renting the car, to go back to the car analogy from Avis or Hertz. On the one side, you don't have as much of a cost of buying the thing because someone's already got sort of paid for it. But then you must actually operate it. You get much better control than Uber. You can decide the route and the parking and the tolls and the whatnot. Of course, you've got cost. And then you've got a reduction in flexibility. You're going to sort of have to accept whatever it is that the other side's done. Does that work for you? Are they in the same time zone? Are they in the same country? Do they serve the same kinds of customers? Do they have the same kinds of legal arrangements? And so on. If the answer is yes, and importantly, you are committed to this as part of your business, because this is not a trivial action that you can take and then say, oops, I changed my mind. You can do that flexibility wise much easier with Uber or Lyft. Cancel the ride, and you're not really losing an arm or a leg or a firstborn. But with an acquisition, after you've gone through that entire process, you really need to be committed to this for several years. So, and then of course, you will still have the staffing issue. Just because you bought somebody, they will have some staff, but then how did they take the merger? Very often, people focus on the technology pieces of the merger, but where most mergers fail is because the two cultures really don't jive. They was organized, set up, led, managed, and had some expectations of culture. And the acquiring organization is a little different. Think Saddam Hussein and Kuwait. That was a merger gone horribly wrong because the two sides had very different views of what happiness and joy really look like. So that's something else to pay attention during the buy phase.
So as you're looking at all three of these, right? I'm sure that there are times when any one of those three are the right way. But if we look at the broader world of the MSSP or the MSP environment, what's your experience on like percentage uptake, market share? Are we seeing a lot of people spin up a SOC and do it on their own in the build environment? Is most of this happening on the partnering side, or are we seeing a real trend toward acquisition? What's your observation in terms of real world dynamics?
So it depends upon size. The very, very big boys, we're talking Verizon level here, they're building because it's their thing. So Comcast is going to build, Verizon is going to build, but then now you're talking about $1 trillion company, and you can do pretty much what you want. You've got the resources, you've got a small army of people to throw at it. But if you're talking about medium or small size businesses, then or MSPs, MSSPs, really partner is practically the only choice. I mean, it'll give you flexibility. It will make it palatable from a budget standpoint. And you can really be a profit center tomorrow, versus having to wait for a long time, which is really an important thing for people. So it's very uncommon to see people building. Now, as far as the buy is concerned, you have to find somebody. And so finding a SOC that's read out there and is willing to sell, and because these are such hot commodities out there, their valuation and their pricing is a little on the north side, not so much on the south side. So then how deep are your pockets? And can you afford, those kinds of valuations and multiples becomes a question. So if you've got all the money because, you won the lotto, great. But is this really where you want to spend it on when you could maybe get some of your other bennies? We don't see a lot of pickup for either of the other two approaches, that is to say, buy or build from mid-sized organizations or smaller.
That's interesting. I do want to ask, just to sort of also be a little bit fair to the build approach, which we talked about earlier, but we focused mostly on the negative side of things. If you are a large organization, if you are you consider yourself to be a bigwig organization that wants to consider yourselves among the Verizons, let's say, of the world, what would be at least the argument to be made on the positive side of taking the build approach? Because I know we talked about the prohibitive cost and the talent shortage, but there's obviously a reason that some people do want to do it. And so just to be fair, since we looked at the positive side of the other two, I want to just also look at what the potential positives would be of the build approach as well. What would those be in your mind?
Full control. You are not really dependent on somebody else's preferences, style, what they consider to be valid outputs. You can actually dictate all of that yourself, and you can tailor it to your needs. Why a lot of big companies prefer to do it this way is because of that, specific reason. They want things a very specific way, and it's going to take them a very long time to tune a partner to do things the way they want it done, whether it's a report or a process or a priority or an urgency or an integration. Them having to be in line with everybody else for this is a problem, because it's simply not on the card for them. And their size and their scope and their urgency is such that it's a thing. And so, sure, full control is the main reason. It comes at all of those prices, but then you are completely in charge of your own domain. It's a big deal.
And I would imagine that is, comparing build versus buy, that's going to be significantly more cost effective. As long as the time to value will actually turn out to be, it's less expensive for me to build my own thing than, as you point out, to buy somebody at sky high multiples, right? The idea of real time monitoring and response, that whole XDR concept is the topic of the day. So buying somebody, you're going to pay. It's like buying real estate 2 years ago, right? It was the highest possible time you could buy into the market. That might not be super wise. If we filter through these pros and cons, most of our audience, small to medium size and getting up from medium to large size MSPs and MSSPs, we do the math, and most of us are going to wind up doing that partnering strategy. So I have a couple of kind of tactical questions for you as you get into that. If I'm the MSP and I want to partner with somebody, how long should a contract be? What am I looking at in terms of the business relationship? Is it wise to sign these long-term contracts and create those expectations? And then B, once I've done that, is this something that I white label to my customer and I present it under my logo? Is this an additional expert service that I position as a partner? With you guys living this in the real world, length contract, how do I position the brand? What's your experience?
So first of all, caveat emptor, buyer beware. So before you enter into any type of relationship, whether it's 1 year, 3 year, whatever, you must in fact validate it through a process, a proof of concept, if you like, and make sure you've covered the typical kinds of use cases, the typical kinds of customers, and you've thrashed out the legal side, the business side, the billing side, and all of that. So it's technology integration, it's the business arrangements, all of that. So if you've made the decision that these are the guys for you, then typically a longer term arrangement like a 3 year is preferable, simply because it will control your escalation costs between year 1, year 2, and year 3. Cyber talent is ridiculously hard to find and gets harder to find. And so if you have a short commitment, then you can and should expect that prices will change meaningfully between year 1 and year 2. Of course, you could arrange, if you can, an out clause, if for things that really broke you, or some kind of mechanism by which, if you didn't like the 3 year commitment, you have some method in which to exit after 12 months or 18 months, fair being fair, to both sides, because typically the other side would have made some sort of an investment, assuming this period of time. But that's something that you should pay attention. So how long? Longer is better for both sides, because it allows you to see a vision and then have a process by which you can actually get integrated.
Excellent, right? And then that one other point that I was doing, how do we position the brand, right? Like, is this, I am MSP and this is a white label service that I present to my customer, or is this something that I don't want to put under my brand and highlight that I'm partnering with an expert?
It depends upon how your expertise is, Ryan. On the one hand, maybe powered by Verizon under your logo is right. Maybe rinky-dink MSP is not right. It sort of depends. I don't think there is a uniform answer. Buyers have become very adept at sniffing out what's underneath. And they may be, in fact, comforted by the fact that there is a specialist who actually knows what they're doing, as opposed to the same person who maybe shows up in order to reboot their PC. And this can actually be a big thing. Some MSPs will not allow, or rather some service providers will not allow white labeling. Others will encourage it. Some will tolerate it. So your mileage is going to vary.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, we want to, obviously, this is a big conversation that has a lot of details. And so for everybody listening in with us today, we don't want this to be the end of the conversation. You've got our contact information through the show page, cyber4hire@cyberriskalliance.com is our email address. You can get in touch with us. Ananth obviously is going to be out there as well, but we expect that we will get some questions. Please, everybody, use this as a resource to keep things going. But before we let you go, Ananth, we want to have a little bit of a fun time with you as well, because obviously the people who do this stuff for a living have their own experiences, and we always want to get to know you a little bit better. And the way we want to do that with you today is to actually look at the world of cybersecurity through the eyes of the professional and ask the question, what actually scares you? Right. So obviously the world of cybersecurity, there's a lot of Chicken Littles, right? We live in a world of alerts and the sky is always falling. But as seasoned cyber pro, you have heard all of these things and you've learned to tune most of them out. But my question is, surely there are things that if you hear an alert, if you hear things in this world, they will get your attention. What is it in your experience, Ananth, that actually scares you?
In 2023, I'd have to say it's identity theft. See, what's happened in the last couple of years as the pandemic has occurred, People have scattered and working from home. Many of the mechanisms by which you can validate that you are who you say you are, you walk into an office, you pass the receptionist or the security guard, you swipe a key fob, you sit in a cubicle where you're visible to everybody else. All of these other controls are now gone. You are your username, you are your password. And that stuff is being hacked. So what was a big deal in 2018-19, which is endpoint, in 2023, it's identity theft. So identity, I would say to you, is the new endpoint. We all have to be extremely mindful because our personas can, in fact, be stolen. And once they are, the outsider becomes the insider. And if the organization hasn't implemented zero trust and, trust nobody kind of a thing, once they're in, they've got the run of the house. We've seen it again and again where the admins were taken, and then later on, when the finger pointing started, there are questions as to why did you do this back in March and this back in April? And the admin is saying, but that really wasn't me. And there is no way to defend it because it appeared to be you. So identity theft is a major concern in 2023.
Terrific advice.
Yeah, sorry, you go, Ryan, sorry.
I was just going to make a quick observation. That is, whether it's a remote working or an MSSP environment, the nature of what we do is we are not sitting face to face with our customers in a cube. So identity is reality. I think that is terrific advice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's certainly, you make a great point, Ananth, about identity becoming the new perimeter. It is the central tenet of zero trust. And so with that, with the increased importance we're placing on identity, it also becomes all the more important that you make sure that the various controls are in place, to protect it, because it's going to really become the key to accessing a lot of your crown jewels. If there was kind of one recommendation you might have for our audience in terms of if identity theft is the boogeyman, how do we protect ourselves? What's your number one recommendation for fighting back right now?
Well, typically you already have some manner of protection because identities are kept in these authentication mechanisms, like Azure Active Directory or the Google authentication mechanism. These are already being secured in some meaningful way. Of course, there are pieces that fall on you. If you hand out credentials like the Halloween candy or you don't pay attention to two-factor authentication, you're going to be in trouble. But assuming you've at least taken a basic set of defenses against it, then it isn't enough to trust all that forever. You must detect if such things are occurring. Look for anomaly, look for entity behavior, and then react and respond. Do you know what baseline is? Can you identify that this person never logs in from Greece, is really in the shipping department? Why are they really suddenly logging into the database server in the data center? Does your technology allow you to detect it? It passed all of the tests. In fact, if you recall, that's exactly how SolarWinds, the exploit got caught, is somebody took it upon themselves to say, why is this long-term employee suddenly registering a new second factor? And he took it upon himself to call that individual and say, hey, did you get a new phone? Because I see that you've been an employee for a while. We've had two-factor for a while, and you're suddenly registering a new second factor. You must have gotten a new phone, right? To which the employee said, what? And that's where the string started to unravel, and they sorted it out. So that's you can't just assume that all these protections are going to work. You should detect.
All right, great. Well, that's going to do it for our What Scares You segment. And now that I'm officially terrified, I would say great job, Ananth. You did a great job there. And thanks for spending time with us also, just talking to us about our big idea in business. I appreciate your perspectives very much. So once again, thanks to Ananth, or AN Ananth from NetSurian. But that's not the end, so don't go anywhere. We are only halfway done with our show. Please return for the second half of our episode featuring our security strategy topic of the week, emergency patching, managing your clients' zero-day fixes. That plus our InfoSec News Rundown and our Dear Cyber for Hire advice column segment. All that's coming up, so we'll see you in a moment on the other side.